If we want to embody the alive presence aspect of non-duality, then we need to be present through the instrument of our aliveness, which is our body.
I'm Deepak Chopra. You're watching New Realities.
Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and this program is about the evolution of consciousness. And consciousness, for me, means the expansion, the opening of who we are as evolving beings. So that is why I'm talking to my good friend, Michael Lydon. He has been practicing and teaching the realization process. He's a practitioner of that, and it's a body-focused way of feeling consciousness, of being alive, of expanding one's perceptions and awarenesses. And, well, Michael, thanks for being here. So talk about the realization process, and first, why you got to be a practitioner, and well, really the essence of the practice.
Yeah, good to see you, Alan. So basically, realization process is it's a body-focused method for finding a place in ourselves that's already well and at ease. And we could say this part of ourselves has never been injured and can't be injured. When people practice meditation, sometimes they describe this domain or dimension as a dimension of pervasive stillness, non-dual consciousness. If we were in a Western religious context, some people might say it's the ground of the divine, and other synonyms that I'm sure you've probably heard a number of them.
Right. So you help people reach that place of just inner peace.
Yes, yeah, and to some people, probably not a lot of your audience, but to some people, it might sound controversial that we can feel into a place that was never injured and that can't be injured. But this isn't something that we have to believe, because we can experience it actually within our own body.
Oh, so the process that you're like, you lead people to this place through a series of steps. Is that what you're doing in your practice?
To just speak to realization process for a minute, I can tell you a little bit about it and how I got interested in it.
And we can even practice some of that, right? You're going to help lead a little small process?
Absolutely, yeah, we can do that.
Great, great. Okay, so tell me, about that.
So I was living in New York. I lived in New York City for 15 years, from 2002 to 2017. I was in a used bookstore one day, and I found this book called The Enlightenment Process. And during my late 20s and in my early 30s, I was really I knew that there was something to that word, enlightenment, spiritual enlightenment. And I wanted to understand it. There was just something intuitive inside of me that wanted to know what that was. And my sense of it was that a lot of us live in anxiety land. It's possible to have a life experience where, yeah, sometimes you feel anxious still, but you're more in inner peace land most of the time. And probably like many young people in their 20s, I was suffering quite a bit. I went through periods of depression for sure. And
should have called me. No, it's okay.
I know that you know a lot of different healers, and so when I was in this used bookstore, I found this book called The Enlightenment Process by Judith Blackstone, and she was a New York-based psychotherapist actually, and I really liked what she had to say in that book. I could relate to a method that had a lot of subtle energy work in it, and she really had a keen understanding of subtle energy, is what I found just in going through that book. And as a New York psychotherapist, she was still very accessible at that time, and so I just basically called her and said, "Hey, I want to see you for psychotherapy." And so part of her practice was leading people through these body-focused techniques where we were finding a very, very subtle part of the energy system, which in yoga is called Sushumna, or in Tibetan Buddhism is called the central channel. It's where it's sort of like the primary meridian, vertical meridian that goes down through the center line of the body that all of our chakra points hook into.
You find that that flow of energy that goes right through you? Is that what you were looking for?
didn't know that I was looking for that at the time. But yes, when we feel into that place, so there is an aspect of that channel where we can feel pulsations and flows of energy. But there's another aspect to it that actually feels still, the still point of the turning world. That's what it feels like. There's this depth in ourselves that we can really actually feel into as an experience that feels unharmed. And although the contents of our experience move, this base of our experience does not.
You were able to find that under her guidance? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. And it's not a hard thing to do. Sometimes, different spiritual books, although I think they're well-meaning, they can make this experience seem more far out or, lofty than it actually is. Because this is the foundation of what we are, everybody can access this. I think I don't. Well, let me qualify that. If somebody really had a severe neurological injury or disadvantage, I don't want to say everybody, but most people can access this very fine, subtle experience of stillness at the core of the body.
Okay, so that's the enlightenment process, but what's the realization process?
Her book was called The Enlightenment Process, and her method is called Realization Process.
How did she discover this?
And at one point, she had injured her back, and when she had tried to heal her back injury, part of that process was getting her spine fused, or getting the vertebra in her spine fused together. And when they operated on her, they fused her off center. So yeah, really, and she described it as a very disorienting experience, not just physically, but also psychologically. There's obviously this connection between the mind and the body, and she felt just, kind of disoriented by that. And she also, at the same time, she had this a good deal of sensitivity to subtle energy, and I probably used a lot of her body awareness and subtle energy awareness, and in terms of just feeling into balance, feeling into these very fine qualities that we can feel. She described periods where she would lie on the floor and feel these subtle energies, subtle energy vibrations coming up from the earth, and that she would kind of use those and navigate the feeling sense of those to bring her into alignment. And that's where a lot of these techniques originated from. I think that she had even she had started doing this even independently of any spiritual tradition, or although she studied several Eastern traditions, Tibetan Buddhism and Kashmir Shaivism and Advaita Vedanta and others, but I think she just had her own natural sensitivity, really very attuned person.
She discovered this place inside herself.
Yeah.
That was never harmed, like the eternal place. Is this what you're saying?
I would say that it's the experience of, Atman being Brahman, or our individual self sort of resting into the universal ground of being.
People come to you, right? And if they have anxiety and you take them through, well, tell me what happens when people come to you.
Yeah, it depends on what their needs are. And by the way, I don't work as a social worker right now, but I am trained as one. I went to school for social work. I have certification in Massachusetts. But as a let's say meditation teacher, one of the things I learned in realization process training when I went through that back in the early 2010s, we can see and feel how people's consciousness is organized in their body even. So let me give you an example. What does anxiety look like? Anxiety looks like this, right? Right? Where kind of our consciousness is actually kind of getting pushed up and out of ourselves. And so if you can kind of feel into where your consciousness lives in your body.
The feeling of where is our tension, where is our, where are we stuck or something, right?
That, yes, exactly. Yeah. So here's how I would explain anxiety, or how I would guide somebody there. So like people's awareness when they're anxious gets kind of pulled up and pushed out, right? And so I would guide them to feel into that and allow them to rest back and down. So to feel that where their consciousness is, where their feeling sense of their self is in their, the internal space of their head. And I would just guide them to sort of rest downward. And, we can even allow our thinking mind to rest down to the base of our neck. We can allow our thinking mind to rest into our heart center. And those can be very, very lovely experiences that can help us settle.
You have a good voice for that. I was starting to go into that place,
I appreciate your feedback.
No, so is it a process? Is it a step by, do you want to lead a little meditation for this?
Sure. And yeah, I can just say that realization process is a set of techniques and methods. It's not just one thing, but we can say that there are general principles like this domain of pervasive consciousness that feels like it's deeper than self and other. It feels like a place that's already well. There's that. There's the experience of the central channel. There's the unblocking of subtle energy in the body. There's emotion held in the body that we can work with. So those are kind of like the foundations, if you will, some of the foundations of realization process. And there's also relational work that's part of it. Like, for instance, a lot of times when we do subtle energy work, sometimes we project ourselves out a little bit, but we can actually connect to people from back here without coming out of ourselves. I can explain that a bit later too.
But before we do that, I just want to say you were going to offer people something watching this video.
I do have classes coming up. Yeah, I've got some free ones actually for people that are interested. You can just send me an email at michael@realizationconsulting.com.
These are online processes with groups of people. Do you do one-on-ones?
I do one-on-ones, yes. Yeah, so I would say that I divide my time between doing one-on-one guided sessions for people that have, specific issues that they want to work with realization process. And I also do classes. So there's one, so a good way of getting introduced to this would be to take, for instance, I have a class called Realization Process Elements, which is it starts in April 13th. And it's for 10 different days. It's Mondays and Thursdays. It goes from April 13th to May 14th from 4:30 to 5:30 Eastern. That's limited to 5 people. In the video links, people can find classes that way. And if people want, if people want to work one-on-one or they want to get more information about classes, I will do a free consultation if they want to see that if this work is for them.
Fine. Right. Yeah. All right. Let's try it. Let's jump in the pool.
So we'll do a little calibration first, just to get us warmed up to what this is and what it involves. Okay. So I'm going to invite you and everybody listening to just, let's just relax and get settled. We can take a few deep breaths just to get centered. Yeah, good. And so first part is that we're just becoming aware of our hands. So and for everybody listening, just being aware of your hands. Any sensations you have, vibratory sensations, feeling sensations, air currents, anything that's going on. Good, good, good. Second part of this exercise is becoming present through your hands.
Like feeling the energy around us as we focus on our hands? Is that what you mean?
It's more like being in your hands and living in your hands from the inside. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and for the folks that are watching, if you feel like you want a little, trick to help you become present through your hands, you can think about your hands growing fur. You can feel what it would be like to grow fur all around your hands. And, don't worry, the fur will be gone once you stop imagining it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's like they expand with the fur.
Yeah. Yeah. So you noticed that. Good. Okay. And so let's come back. And normally I would ask, I would ask a class what their experience was with this. Just briefly, what was your experience with being aware of versus being present in?
Being aware of, right. Being present, that's the difference, really. Being aware, I could be aware of my hands, but when I'm present in my hands, my energy is kind of less in my head and more in my body. Or
Yeah, perfect.
yeah, that's what I felt. Yes.
That's the idea. Yeah. So there was one thing that really made a body focused pathway for spiritual awakening click with me, which is this. When we talk about non-duality, we're talking about this pervasive field of stillness, which the other side of the coin is aliveness, alive presence, stillness, emptiness, and alive presence. Those are both aspects of this, we could say, sense of universal consciousness, underlying consciousness, etc. Okay, so if we want to really if we really want to embody this alive presence, then we have to be present through the instrument of our aliveness, which is our body, and energy body, we could say. But we have to be present through that instrument.
Say that part again. I'm trying to take that all in. If we want
to embody the alive presence aspect of non-duality, then we need to be present through the instrument of our aliveness, which is our body.
not just in our head thinking about it, or which is the problem with non-dual thought, because it's thought, right?
It can be. It can be. I'm sure if you've ever been on like a message board, there's a lot of non-dual thinking that goes on there. Yeah, which is fine. I mean, we're all trying to understand this, right? But I would say that there's a few different dimensions to non-dual experience. One of them, of course, is this pervasive awareness, but there's also an emotional openness too, that we can feel more through the heart and more through the middle, section of our body. And we can actually feel a deep sensory richness as well that's part of that experience that we can feel through the lower part of our body. We can feel it everywhere, but those are three elements of it: awareness, emotional openness, and sensory richness.
Well, how have you changed as teaching this, also embodying this? What's happened for you?
I would say that I'm a lot more centered, and I'm a lot more attuned to feelings than I used to be. I used to be like a brain on a stick, a lot of intellectual process, a lot of, just overthinking things. So actually, I have a little hack for people if they want to learn how to slow their thoughts.
Yes, tell us. That's great. Yes.
Okay. So, and this is one that I learned when I was in realization process training. Just experimenting with positioning the focus in different areas of the body. So normally, right, when we engage each other socially, our consciousness can feel like it's here, right? I don't literally mean that the soul is here, but we can feel our feeling sense as being right there.
Right. That's where we kind of see the world, process, bring it in through our sensorial perceptions. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm going to invite you and all the audience members to do is just notice the thoughts that are going on. And so just bring that sense back a little bit so that you're almost like looking out, but through the center of your brain.
I feel that. Yeah, that definitely is a shift for me. Yes.
And the other one, which will really slow things down in my experience and people that I've worked with, is if you can think about like a little lounge chair in the back of your brain and just feel like you're resting back into that lounge chair in the back of your brain and just resting your focus there.
It completely opens my crown chakra. I feel like it's like, just feel like this opening when we do that. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that does change my sense of being present within the world. It's sort of, I'm sitting back in myself, mm-hmm. and allows the world to meet me instead of me, trying to push out to the world. You know what I mean? Like I'm.
Yes.
Yes, I'm receiving
we can feel into this depth of ourselves, and that can be a really powerful healing resource for people. Because, for instance, we can start to feel into qualities that are unconstructed, that we don't have to invent, and that we could say are part of our true self. But the point is that we can feel into qualities that are unconstructed, and those can be powerful healing resources. So, for instance, yeah.
What does that mean? Feelings unconstructed. I'm not sure what that means.
Okay. Yeah. Can we do a little exercise?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Okay.
I want people to be excited about this because I know it's changed your life, and I think you're skilled enough to help change other people's lives. So that's why I'm sure as much practice as we can do, give them a taste of the work. Sure. Okay, let's do it.
Sure. Find the center of your chest and feel around for it. And so we know these contact points, these energy centers in the body by the way that they feel. So if we feel into the center of our chest and just feel back into near the spine, near the inner part of the spine in the core of the chest. And this center also feels like a point that we can rest our consciousness on just comfortably. Yeah, okay, good. So just see if you can feel like a vibratory tone of emotional warmth that's already back there.
I feel a little anxiety, though, first, I have to say, whatever that is. And then I guess I just let that come out.
So if somebody said that they felt anxiety or tension, I would say, see if you can just gently bring your focus behind that.
Oh, okay.
See if you can feel, a spark of aliveness that's deeper in there.
Oh, okay. I think I got it. Okay. I think that was just a release of something that I just went through. But yes. Okay. I think I'm close to that. Okay.
So can you feel like a little spark in there in the core point of your chest?
I think so. I also strangely feel the tension of this, but I think I'm just becoming aware of different holdings, armorings, or tension in the muscles.
Yeah, you're using armoring from Wilhelm Reich. Is that where you got that word?
Just a tension in the body. As I relax and find that point, I also find what's surrounded, and now it's sort of dropping away as that point becomes that point of aliveness. That center becomes more in focus, let's say.
Yeah, good. So can you feel like this is like a little pilot light or something, but it feels like emotional warmth that's there already. In other words, we don't have to effort it into existence. And that's what I mean by unconstructed.
Oh, I see. It's already there. Oh, yeah, I think I can find that. Yes.
Good. And if I wanted people to, maybe rest more deeply into that, I might say, think about your favorite cute animal, or think about, something that inspires this feeling of love or tenderness.
Sunset or or some beautiful partner or something that will, feel cozy and yes.
Exactly. And the more in tune we become with that feeling that's already there, that's what I mean by discovering or uncovering these innate qualities, and we can rest into them. And we can, for people that have, let's say, been through some sort of trauma, you can say, okay, now feel the love in your chest, feel that quality pervade your whole body all at once, and allow it to touch into this part that feels like it's it's been wounded or hurt. And that can be a really beautiful experience for people.
No, I feel that. So you said, though, originally it's all about getting to the Sushumna.
That's part of it, yeah, because so see if you can, have you had experiences where you felt that before?
I have. The Sushumna, you mean? The central channel?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have felt like Kundalini, yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Even if we don't have those big openings of energy coming up that sometimes are called kundalini, um, we can find what feels like a balance space. If you were to draw just like a straight line through the torso, one way that I point to this is I'll say, if we were to feel all the areas that feel like the front of the body, and then feel all the areas from the inside that feel like the back. The central channel feels like it's in a space that's poised between front and back.
Okay, I think I got that. Yes.
And how does that register to you?
I do feel sort of a stillness when I put my mind there. Like a flame, also like some energy actually sort of coming up in a way.
Beautiful. Yeah, and so I just want all the viewers to know that whatever your experience is, that is totally okay.
And it's different for everyone. Yeah,
it's different for everyone. And Alan, I know that you've done a lot of this work already. So yeah,
it's always new for me, and I think this process is there's some good things that I'm feeling in this different parts of myself using my mind that feels new and fresh. You talked about the enlightenment, though.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the point of this work? Is to bring out a kind of enlightened awareness?
So, yeah, yes, that is part of it. We could say it's a realization process is a body focus method for both spiritual awakening and healing. And part of that is that those two things, spiritual awakening and psychological healing, are two sides of the same coin. I have heard people say things like, well, once you stabilize in non-dual awareness, you realize that nothing is real, and your personal narrative self is not real, and blah, blah, blah. I don't think that that's a very useful teaching for people, especially when they've experienced trauma, or especially when they're looking to heal something. Because if you tell somebody, oh, that's just your story, well, that's how we survived. So it's not a story like you could, just, I don't know, read Moby Dick and forget about it. It's not a story like that. It's how we survived. So getting back to this idea about enlightenment, right? Here's how I define enlightenment. There are initial glimpses of this still space that we could call Kensho, Satori, divine, what is it? Unitive revelation is what it's called in Christian mysticism. And we get glimpses, right? So like when I was in college, I kept meditating on this idea that God is everything, right? I just kept thinking about that, and it made rational sense. And then there was one point where I was like, what does that actually mean? And then boom, right? I really felt like there was this love that was it was coming from inside of me, but it was also everywhere else too. And it was there, and I just hadn't perceived it. So that we could call a type of awakening experience. And probably a lot of your viewers have had that type of thing. There are different varieties of them. Sometimes they feel more like stillness, sometimes more like universal love, etc. Now, the more that experience becomes the sort of foundation of our conscious awareness, we could say the more awake we are along some meaningful dimension.
Day conscious awareness, our ongoing, continuous conscious awareness. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. So sometimes this is called stabilized non-duality, or there's a social scientist who's done a lot of research on awakening. I also took his course, which is very nice. It's called the Finder's Course. His name is Jeffrey Martin. But he calls it persistent non-symbolic experience, which I like that term.
I like that too, yeah.
Yeah. But the point is that, yeah, it becomes more and more, it's in the background at first. Like we kind of have the sense that everything is okay, and we can feel into this space that's nice and still. And then eventually it starts to, shift our consciousness in various ways where maybe we start to become more attuned to the vibrations of life, and we can feel this dimension sort of everywhere. And that's in our normal state of consciousness, where we feel that this pervasive underlying transpersonal field of awareness is everywhere, through us, in us, everywhere. So
are you feeling that all the time, or more of the time?
I would say more of the time. I don't feel that all the time. And I don't want to give people the impression that just because I'm at the quote unquote front of the seminar room here, that I'm like Ramana Maharshi or something. But I would say that I have a particular skill set that can help people stabilize into that state more and more. Yeah.
You're also there more and more too, from, the anxiety-ridden person from New York. You're now in a...
Absolutely. And I mean, I feel like these practices have helped with things like issues with attachment and relational issues. So this, I'll tell you, some meditation methods will make you a little can make people or predispose them to be a little more disconnected from their relationships. And this one is one that has actually we could say it's girlfriend approved or domestic partner approved because
more connected to your relationships.
It makes you more connected without merging with the other person, or without having like boundary issues with the other person, where you merge with them, or where you like where you get entangled, right? It's a very disentangling, but also
especially if both of you are doing this, right? I mean, that makes it probably...
my domestic partner she was actually trained in somatic experiencing, which is kind of like a kissing cousin to realization process. And she's done some classes, with me, and we have exchanges of ideas, that sort of thing. And it's neat, of course, to talk to somebody who's in a kind of a very similar healing school. But she's also a social worker. So, yeah. So I just wanted to circle back to what you asked about, awakening, right? So awakening is fundamental consciousness, right? This pervasive field of underlying stillness and alive presence is our own consciousness when it's clearly experienced. And so that begs the question of why we don't experience this more often, why the average person doesn't. The reason for that is that we have a mental grip on our experience that kind of funnels our consciousness in a way, or constricts it. And inclusive within that mental grip on our experience is different holding patterns that are related to developmental psychology, traumas that we've been through, either relational trauma, severe trauma, or just lifetime conditioning that kind of funnels our consciousness in a way. So when we release those constrictions, we can do that through meditation practices, direct mind-body integration techniques, attunement to stillness, and attunement to these different innate qualities. We can do it that way. We can also, if a point of constriction is really deep, we can do practices that help unwind those holding patterns in the body.
Nice. So you have like a whole arsenal of tools that can deal with different aspects of where that person's coming from. Is that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I've worked with people before. One individual had depression for quite a long time. She had already been through a number of therapies that were helpful, and that that helped her get a lot of emotional awareness, and that helped soften a lot of the depressive symptoms a bit. But she was still having trouble. She was still having trouble working because of some things there. And when I helped her find her central channel, it was sort of a revelation that there was joy that was like living in the core of her body.
Nice.
And so that gradually helped dispel symptoms of depression for her. And now she after several months of working together, she was able to go out and get a job.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, because she became aware of a different sense of herself that was already there, and probably out of her mind, which is recycles the old dramas, so that's my sense.
Yeah, well, what she said, and look, this is not, I never expected this or anticipated it. I'm just happy to work with people, right? But what she had said, the feedback that she gave was, I realized that when I realized that the universe was my parent, I could let go of my mother as my parent, as my not so good parent.
The universe was her parent, not.
That was her inner experience of this. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Wow, that woman's onto some really high realizations, I would say.
I think so too. Yeah, she's lovely.
That is excellent. That is great. No, I was just curious about the woman who created this again, the Enlightenment process. What was her name?
Judith Blackstone.
And what's her? Where did she reach a state through this training and where's she at?
So she had. So I think the order of things was that she sustained a back injury, and then that's kind of set her on her healing journey. And some of these subtle attunement techniques were just things that came out of her own intuition and a combination of body awareness and subtle energy attunement. And there were things that sort of organically arose out of her own healing process and teaching. When she was teaching dance, she would incorporate some of these things into teaching people dance. So because there's definitely a bodywork component of realization process as well. She described a period where she was living in a Zen monastery, and she recounted an experience where she was sitting by this stream, and all of a sudden she noticed that the rocks were transparent. Like these solid objects were also transparent. They were solid, yet they were transparent, pervaded by this very still space at once. And that is one quality of non-duality that we can experience, that you can sit and meditate with an object, for instance, and find a place in your own consciousness that's so subtle that it seems to pass through external objects. Yeah. So, yeah.
So has she reached a state? I mean, of
Oh, that's the question. Okay.
just
Yeah.
but that's a great experience to have. But yes, tell me.
Yeah. I gave that example because that's one anecdote that I remember her recounting where she had another dimension of this realization of things being transparent. And that's, of course, incorporated into realization process as well. But when you asked, is she awake? What was the exact question you wanted to know?
She reached a state of that steady presence, like in her daily life. I'm just wondering, like, since she created this awareness and practiced it, I'm sure, has she maintained a state of awakening? I guess I'm asking. She's still in the process of it.
Well, so yeah, I think that I don't know if I feel comfortable speaking to her internal experience. I mean, I think that based on what she's told me and well, what I know of her, I would say that, yeah, I think she is. But awakening is a continuum. So we have to be careful with, if we say somebody's awake, what does that mean? Yeah.
Because I'm just wondering, is there like a final destination that one reaches and boom, you've arrived? Or, like you're saying, probably it's an ongoing process.
I think it's always ongoing. In some schools, there are grades or levels, and maybe those do describe legitimate types of experiences that we can stabilize into, or how our consciousness can shift. At the same time, I feel like even if somebody, I don't know, let's say hypothetically is on their billionth lifetime and they're still, they're here on Earth, and maybe they're doing all sorts of things that would blow our socks off with subtle energy and whatnot, right? They've still got whatever awakening they have to do still. I think that everything, even if we're like a post-human consciousness at some point that's off creating universes somewhere, maybe there's still some subtlety or depth that can be refined.
Oh, that's what existence is. It's an ongoing process of discovery, I think. So, but no, I really like what you've been demonstrating here and its origins. But also, it seems like it's a way of directing your conscious or your awareness to different places of perception, like internal, the center of your head or your central channel. And then when your consciousness is directed to those places, or your awareness, there's a shift in our sense of being. That's what I'm getting.
There's a shift in our sense of being. Exactly. Yeah. We could say that the quality of stillness and balance that we feel in the core of ourselves, right? We can start to perceive that everywhere. So it's sort of a gateway. Yeah.
And how long is a session when people do this with you?
They can, it varies based on a person's needs and what they want. I would say it can be an hour and a half, 2 hours. 2 hours, I would say, is my maximum. But yeah.
And you work with all sorts of emotional issues or any issues. Tell me you said depression, and that really helped that person. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say if somebody were coping with something like, because I work primarily at a distance. If somebody were coping with something like either schizophrenia, something that's biologically based and that's not, let's say, just purely mentally generated suffering, then I would not feel comfortable. I would say that person should see a therapist or like a specialist in whatever their presenting issue is. If it's like, everyday anxiety or depression or things, or if somebody wants to deepen their level of awareness, then yeah, these techniques can be helpful for that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And you're not using psychotherapy, you're using a direction of awareness. That's how I would say it.
Yeah, using a direction of awareness. Now, I'll tell you that there are release techniques. So when somebody has stress, right, there's a constriction in the body somewhere, right? And for chronic stressors, that can be persistent. And so there are techniques that involve unwinding those holding patterns in the body. And I have classes that are specifically for that, that you can find on.
Quick unwinding here. Do you have something that would just demonstrate how we unwind?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. And I would advise everybody to just listen to this first before you do it. And if it seems like it's something that you're comfortable with, then you can do it. Okay. Because I don't want, I don't want somebody to like open themselves up in a way that feels uncomfortable for them. What I would normally do, and I know that you've done a lot of this work and you're well resourced already. What I would do first normally is have people become present in different areas of their body and feel into that central channel as a place that really is solid. It's a foundation. It really feels stable, like a place that has a lot of resiliency to it. And it feels like it is a source of well-being and all of that, foundational well-being. So after that, then somebody has a place to release into, and then I would start doing some release work with them. So here's the technique. It's actually quite simple. So you can find any part of tension. So find any part of your body that has tension associated to it. Okay. And so where do you feel it?
Sort of my neck, a little bit.
Okay. So yeah, so just become present through that area. In the same way that you became present through your hands, just become present through the internal space of your neck and your head. Okay, good. And just notice the constriction, the sort of texture of it and the shape. Okay. Good. Okay. So in addition to just feeling the constriction, actually bring your focus into the constriction from within. And so we're not intentionally or volitionally clenching at all, but just bringing our focus into the constriction. As you do that, can you feel it tighten just a little bit on a subtle? Can you feel it subtly tighten?
But more, let's say, in that sense, I feel more of that. If I put my attention there, it's more present.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So just hold your focus there for a minute and see if you can feel without doing anything, but just see if you can feel it on its own, constricting a touch further.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so just hold your focus there until the tension gets to its deepest point, however that feels to you. Okay. And when it gets to that point, release your focus and just allow the tension to unwind in whatever way it does. Okay. So what did you notice there?
Sort of loosened up after I focused on it. I felt the tighten, and then it sort of just kind of felt a little more. It felt less tense there. I mean, it sort of dropped away, kind of. Yeah, something shifted in that awareness. So, Michael, this is great stuff.
Thank you. Okay. I appreciate your feedback. So with this technique, this is the realization process release technique. There's more to it than this. But let's say, right, so I've just got a little napkin here, right? So let's say that there's a twist in the napkin. Well, how would we get the twist out of the napkin? Well, we would sort of follow the direction of the twist and just unwind it along that same direction, along that same direction and shape. Well, along the same shape but different direction. In any case, one theory behind what's happening in our body, like why we experience these tensions, is because there's kind of a tightening of the fascia, and the fascia is connective tissue that goes through the whole body. And so when there's a constriction, we can actually feel the shape and directionality of it. And so seemingly when we bring our focus into it, it tightens just on its own without us having to do anything. And when it tightens, we hold our focus there. And then when we release our focus, it releases a little bit more just on its own. And the way that I like to think about this is sort of like this, right? You've like the pen tip, right? We depress it. And then once we depress it, then it releases a bit more. I don't know exactly why it works that way. I have some ideas. I don't know exactly why. But when we do that more and more and more, it brings us into more and more subtle aspects of release. And for people that have stress that's located, in different places in the body, this can be helpful because it will start to release on a deep level whatever emotional charge is held there.
Yes. All right. Yeah, no, I think all this is really great. You've really studied this process, and I think you have so many tools to help people. Now, how can people find you again?
So they can contact me through my website. There's a form there where they can request a free consultation at realizationconsulting.com. You can just also email me if you want at michael@realizationconsulting.com.
Great. And you're saying you're offering people a free consultation?
Yeah, if people want to just explore this to see if it's right for them, then I will do a free, half-hour consultation if they want, and people can email me about that. Class.
Yeah. No. How long was your training in becoming a teacher or a facilitator of this?
It was over a 3-year period. So, yeah, it was 3 years. It was supervised by Judith Blackstone. I took an additional certification in trauma repair that was from Judith Blackstone, which was a lot of the release technique that we just did.
Is she still teaching, Judith?
Yes. Yeah, she is. And there's a number of other realization process teachers that go ahead.
Maybe I'll interview her at some point,
Oh, yeah. I would. Yeah. I can try to help you set that up if you want.
All right. Well, let's see how people respond to this. But that's definitely I like to go and talk to people who originate whole new branches of ideas and technologies. So that's great. No, but I really appreciate you spending time going through this with us because I think it's really valid and it feels like, well, yeah, I feel like a different sense of myself, as I learn to place awareness in different parts and see. What did you say the difference between, was it embodiment and awareness or something you called it?
One distinction that we can make is aware of versus aware as.
Right, aware of, aware as. So if I'm aware as my hands, that's a whole different experience than being aware of my hands. Okay, that's the
right.
Aware as. That's good. Talking to Michael Lydon, would you call yourself a facilitator? Is that it?
Realization process teacher. I'm certified as an advanced practitioner or teacher of realization process. And I define it as a body-focused meditation for spiritual growth and healing.
Yeah, more than a meditation, it's a body. I mean, my sense was a body-focused therapy in a sense, almost. I would call it. If you don't want to, maybe you don't want to call it that, but I felt it.
Well, I would say I feel comfortable saying I'm a realization process practitioner. Certainly, there are practices that can help facilitate with trauma repair that are part of it. It's definitely a healing tool. There are definitely psychological healing elements to it.
Thank you, Michael, for your time and your ability to give yourself to serve the greater consciousness, the greater population. So,
thank you, Alan, and thanks for all the work you do in bringing these ideas to people.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh well, sure. I mean, how else are people going to find out about things that could help them? And I think there's, I only talk to people, there's lots of people out there. I talk to people I feel who have something really valid and important to offer. So that's why we're talking.
I appreciate you. Okay. All right. Thanks, Alan. And I'm sure we'll be in touch soon. Take care.